Good evening, Igor Zdanov, Arty Vladimir Vladimirovic. Going back to Alaska, you immediately began to communicate with US President Donald Trump right after landing on the red carpet. Then, after taking the photo, you got into the car with him and continued your conversation. Could you, please, tell us what you were talking about? What language were you speaking? What were the details of your conversation? Thank you very much.
Of course, we were speaking in English, but the broken part of my vocabulary remains partially intact. At the very beginning, I told him at the press conference, I said, "I am very glad to see you, dear neighbor, healthy and alive." While we were driving in a limousine, it took us 30 seconds to get there. We used general phrases and that was it.
And one more important question about the special operation. Vladimir Vladimirovic, there is a chance that it will end soon. How do you feel about this? Do you feel it? Are we moving towards the end?
I will start with the second part, since it is the key one. Back in 2022, we offered the Ukrainian authorities to respect the choice of those people who live in the southeast of Ukraine, to withdraw their troops from there and to end this conflict immediately. I must say that, in general, this did not cause a complete rejection. But after we, on the insistence of our Western European colleagues, withdrew our troops from Kiev, the situation immediately changed. We were told, almost literally, that now we will fight until either you turn your heads away from us or we will turn our heads away from you. I do not remember whether I ever said this publicly or not, but it sounded something like this. Only in more crude expressions, but quite openly and, oddly enough, in a friendly way. Now it is either us or you. And so it goes on. Nevertheless, I believe that if common sense still prevails, then it is possible to agree on an acceptable option to end this conflict. This is what I will say. Moreover, we can see the mood of the current US administration under the leadership of President Trump. We see not just a call, but a sincere desire to find a solution. I think there is a certain light at the end of the tunnel. Let us see how the situation unfolds. If not, we will have to solve all the problems we are faced with by arms.
You often talk about the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis, when the country began to be dragged into NATO. But now we see that European leaders, who declare and discuss certain guarantees of security for Ukraine, are almost completely focused on deploying their troops in Ukraine. At the same time, many continue to insist on Ukraine's entry into the EU. But we also see that the EU is rapidly turning into a kind of economic union, a kind of military political bloc, where there are almost always aggressive decisions, aggressive statements. How can you comment on all this?
I agree with those who believe that each country has the right to choose the system of ensuring its security. This applies to all countries, including Ukraine. But this also means that the security of one country cannot be ensured by the security of another country, in this case the Russian Federation. We have always opposed Ukraine being a member of this North Atlantic bloc, but we have never questioned its right to carry out its economic activities as it pleases, including its membership in the EU.
Can we talk about Ukraine? Yes, you can. Hello, Mr. Putin. When Russia and the United States are now discussing the peaceful settlement of the situation in Ukraine, it is more and more common to hear the phrase, security guarantees in exchange for territory. Does this correspond to what you said to Trump in Alaska? And what do your words mean when you said that Russia is ready to join the development of these guarantees? Who should be the guarantor, in your opinion? And if you allow me, about Zelensky. Does it make sense to meet with him now, in the current conditions? Is it possible to draw up some kind of agreement at this meeting? The United States is now making some assumptions that there is a formula for security guarantees in exchange for territory.
No, we have never raised or discussed such a question. Security guarantees are natural. I often say this. We assume that any country should have these security guarantees, including Ukraine. But this has nothing to do with any kind of exchange, especially with the exchange of territory. To be honest, and I would like to emphasize this, we are not fighting for territory, but for human rights and for the rights of the people who live in these territories to speak their own language, to live within their culture and traditions, which have been passed down from previous generations, from their fathers, from their grandfathers, and so on. This is primarily what we are talking about. And if these people, during the electoral and democratic procedures, including during the referendums, have spoken out in favor of being a part of the Russian Federation, this opinion must be respected. This is democracy. I would like to remind those who forget about it. And above all else, this is in complete accordance with international law. I would also like to remind you of the first articles of the United Nations Charter, where it is written directly about the right of nations to self-determination. But we do not associate one thing with another. Territory and security guarantees, of course, can be said to be close topics, but we do not directly associate them with each other. And so the question was not raised during the discussion in Anchorage. As for possible meetings with Mr. Zelensky, I have already spoken about this. In general, I have never ruled out the possibility of such a meeting. Is there any sense in these meetings? Look, let's see. In accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine, some may agree with it, some may not. We just need to read the text carefully. There are no ways to extend the powers of the President of Ukraine in the Constitution of Ukraine. None at all. He was elected for 5 years. 5 years have passed, that's it. The powers are over. There is a situation in which elections are not held in a military situation. This is true. But this does not mean that the powers of the President are prolonged. This means that his powers are exhausted, and his rights are transferred to the Speaker of the Rada, including his powers as the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. So, what should the current authorities do? If they want to be legitimate and take full part in the process of their regulation, they must hold elections. I mean, not elections, I'm sorry, they must hold a referendum, in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine. Any issues on the territory are resolved only by a referendum, as far as I remember. But a referendum cannot be held in a military situation. This is also a constitutional situation of the Constitution. In order to hold a referendum, a military situation must be abolished. But as soon as this is done, elections must be held. And this process will last indefinitely. The outcome of the elections is not clear, but whatever the outcome, it is necessary to obtain the corresponding conclusion of the Constitutional Court. This is how it is written in the Constitution. But how can we obtain the conclusion of the Constitutional Court? If, after the authorities demanded from the Constitutional Court of Ukraine to approve the extension of the President's powers, and the President actually refused to do this, do you know what they did in Ukraine? It is funny, but it is a fact. The security forces stopped sending the President of the Constitutional Court to his workplace. That's it. This is the end of the film. Well, not quite. Because, as far as I know, I don't know where he is now, but he once went abroad. But in recent years, some members of the Constitutional Court have lost their powers. They don't have a quorum to make decisions. Therefore, this is a dead end. If we just hold a meeting with the current head of the administration, let's put it this way, it is possible, and I have never refused to do so, if this meeting is well prepared and will lead to some positive possible results. By the way, Donald asked me if it is possible to hold such a meeting. I said, yes, it is possible. In the end, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow. Such a meeting will take place.
Can it be done?
Yes, it can.